You were taught Miami rose from sunshine and hustle. It was built by fleeing oil elites, laundering power, buying silence, and selecting winners. Feel exposed yet? If this feels uncomfortable, stay. Chapter 1. The Mirage City. You were trained to see Miami as reward. Sunlight, freedom, momentum. A place where ambition arrives and money follows. That belief is the first weakness this city exploits. Miami was not built by effort rising upward. It was built by power running sideways. When Venezuelan oil money sensed exposure, political risk, social revenge, historical consequence, it did not argue, reform, or stay loyal. It moved, quietly, efficiently, without apology. Cities do not grow by accident, they are chosen. This chapter reframes Miami not as a destination, but as a shelter, a holding zone where capital waits out history. The towers, the banks, the luxury condos were not monuments to productivity. They were storage units for influence that needed distance, not legitimacy. What you were told was investment was often escape with paperwork. Psychologically, this matters because it exposes a deeper rule. Systems reward those who exit early, not those who endure longest. Loyalty to collapsing structures is not noble. It is fatal. Miami thrived because it welcomed people who understood this instinctively. People who treated borders, laws, and narratives as tools, not vows. The Mirage works because it flatters the observer. It tells you success is visible, loud, explainable. But the real builders of this city did not announce themselves. They arrived with restraint, bought leverage, and let others argue about culture and morality while they secured outcomes. If this unsettles you, it should. It means the map you were using was decorative. The real map was financial, psychological, and already drawn by men who never planned to stay and fight. Chapter 2. Capital has survival instincts. You were taught that money is neutral, earned, spent, taxed, redistributed. That belief keeps you compliant. In reality, capital behaves like a living organism. It senses danger. It migrates before collapse. It does not ask permission. Venezuelan oil money did not move because of ideology. It moved because proximity to power had become liability. When institutions weaken, when loyalty becomes a demand instead of a choice, capital reads the signal instantly. It leaves behind flags and speeches. It takes only leverage. This is the mechanism you were never shown. Wealth does not seek growth first. It seeks insulation. Profit is secondary. Survival is primary. Miami was not attractive because it was glamorous. It was attractive because it was quiet, permissive, and close enough to influence without exposure to consequence. The men who moved that money understood something you were not taught to notice. Systems collapse long before they admit it. By the time slogans turn desperate and leaders speak of unity, the exit windows are already closing. Capital that waits for clarity dies. Capital that moves early rewrites geography. Psychologically, this shatters a comforting myth. You were told staying loyal proves character, enduring proves strength. But the system rewards the opposite. It rewards those who detach early, who treat nations as containers, not identities. This is why cities like Miami expand, while countries hollow out. They are not centers of production. They are pressure valves, places where power hides in plain sight, while others argue about fairness. Once you see this mechanism, you cannot unsee it. You stop asking who deserves wealth, you start asking who understood timing, and you realize most people are trained to arrive late, right when survival has already been decided. Chapter 3. Predators, couriers, and the useful crowd. Inside every collapsing system, the roles are already assigned, not by law, by temperament. You don't choose the archetype, you reveal it under pressure. There are predators. They do not wave flags or shout slogans. They read balance sheets like weather patterns. When risk accumulates, they move silently. They don't argue with the state, they drain it. Their loyalty is not ideological, it is temporary and priced. Venezuelan oil elites, bankers, and intermediaries who moved capital early were not traders. They were consistent with their nature. Then there are couriers. These are the professionals, lawyers, accountants, developers, fixers. They do not own the wealth, but they enable its movement. They speak in procedures and compliance, hiding extraction behind paperwork. They are indispensable and invisible. Systems collapse faster because couriers make exits clean. And then there is the crowd, the useful majority. They argue about justice while value is already gone. They defend institutions that no longer defend them. They are trained to believe endurance is virtue. They are rewarded with slogans, not leverage. Here is the psychological trap. You are encouraged to identify with the crowd while admiring the predators from a safe moral distance. This keeps you harmless. The moment you start thinking like a predator without the leverage to act, you become dangerous to the narrative. Miami did not fill with predators alone. It filled with couriers and capital that knew exactly who would protect it and who would be blamed. The crowd remained behind, loyal to symbols that could no longer pay them. This chapter is not about choosing a side. It is about recognizing behavior under stress. When pressure rises, morality becomes decorative. Only positioning survives. If this unsettles you, good. It means you are starting to see the roles clearly. Chapter 4. History doesn't punish this behavior, it rewards it. If you believe collapse is a lesson that corrects behavior, you misunderstand history. Collapse is not a moral reckoning. It is a transfer mechanism. Every empire that failed left behind the same pattern. Rome hollowed out while its elites relocated wealth to safer provinces. Byzantium survived centuries longer not through virtue, but through delay, diplomacy, and selective abandonment. The British Empire exited territories poor in loyalty, but rich in extracted capital. The system does not collapse evenly. It fractures along lines of preparation. This is the threat you are meant to ignore. Extraction is not an accident of corruption. It is the natural end state of centralized power under stress. When resources tighten, systems protect continuity, not people. They sacrifice the many to stabilize the few who can still move value. Oil states follow this script precisely. Venezuela was not uniquely cursed. It followed the same trajectory as Iran in 1979, Russia in the 1990s, Libya after 2011. Sudden wealth creates dependency. Dependency creates political theater. Theater delays reform. Then comes the exit, fast, quiet, and one-directional. History proves something uncomfortable. Those who leave early are never punished by time. They are remembered as lucky, connected, or controversial. Those who stay are honored with suffering and posthumous explanations. The danger deepens here. Once this pattern becomes visible, it cannot be unseen. You realize that stability is not promised, it is rented, and rent rises fastest during crises. This chapter exists to close the illusion that patience protects you. It does not. Patience without leverage is just obedience wearing a virtue mask. Systems do not collapse suddenly, they drain first. By the time chaos is visible, the exits are already sealed. This is not cynicism, it is pattern recognition. Chapter 5. Stop playing fair inside a rigged arena. The instinct you are taught is participation. Speak up, contribute, be visible, align. This instinct is cultivated precisely because it makes you predictable. Predictability is leverage for someone else. Strategic behavior begins with subtraction. You remove noise, exposure, unnecessary motion. You stop explaining yourself to systems that profit from your transparency. Silence is not passivity here. Silence is reconnaissance. Inside collapsing or extractive systems, the mistake is action without position. People rush to protest, to declare loyalty, to signal virtue, to pick sides early. This creates records. Records become liabilities. The ones who survive longest are not the loudest or the bravest. They are the least legible. Watch who moves last. Watch who speaks in private, not in crowds. Watch who converts visibility into insulation. These actors are not moral exemplars. They are survival technicians. Behavior shifts from effort to placement. You conserve energy. You avoid irreversible commitments. You keep options liquid. This does not mean withdrawal from reality. It means refusing to become collateral for narratives that need bodies more than outcomes. Restraint becomes power when others are compelled to react. You let urgency burn through the impatient. You let ideology exhaust the loyal. You remain operational. The system expects friction or obedience. It is unprepared for detachment with awareness. This is where leverage is born, not through confrontation, but through asymmetry. You are not fighting the machine. You are refusing to feed it timing, data, or devotion. This chapter reframes action itself. The goal is not to win arguments or save structures. The goal is to remain sovereign while others are drafted into urgency. Once you understand this, behavior simplifies. Fewer words, fewer promises, fewer witnesses. Chapter 6. The Death of the Useful Self. The identity you were given was functional, not true. It was designed to make you legible, cooperative, and replaceable. You were trained to believe your value came from contribution, visibility, and moral alignment. That identity works only when the system needs builders. It becomes a liability when the system begins harvesting. This chapter destroys that identity without ceremony. The useful self seeks validation. It explains, it defends, it hopes to be seen as on the right side. That instinct is fatal in declining structures. Systems in decay do not reward loyalty. They reward utility and discard it immediately after extraction. What replaces the useful self is colder and quieter. It does not announce transitions. It does not seek applause. It does not require consensus to act. This identity understands that survival is not a collective outcome. It is an individual one. You stop asking where you belong. You start asking where you are insulated. This is not cynicism. It is clarity. You recognize that morality is often used as a recruitment tool, that outrage is a sorting mechanism, that crises are filters designed to expose who can be pressured, rushed, or guilted into sacrifice. The sovereign identity does not rebel loudly. It exits psychologically before it exits physically. It detaches from narratives that demand emotional labor. It refuses to be rushed into permanent positions during temporary chaos. You no longer confuse conviction with safety. You no longer confuse speaking with strength. You no longer confuse participation with control. The death here is subtle. No dramatic break, no announcement, just a gradual refusal to perform the role that made you exploitable. You replace it with discipline, with delayed response, with selective visibility, with an understanding of timing that others lack because they are busy proving something. This identity is not heroic. It is durable. It survives purges because it does not stand where purges occur. It survives collapses because it is not attached to symbols that fall. It survives transitions because it waits until direction is irreversible before moving. This chapter ends the need to be understood. It replaces it with the need to remain intact. Most people will resist this shift because it feels like betrayal of who they thought they were. That resistance is proof the old identity was never theirs to begin with. Chapter 7. The Line. Most men won't cross. This chapter is not an ending. It is a sorting mechanism. By now, the structure should be visible to you, not as theory, as pattern. You have seen how wealth, power, and legitimacy move independently of morality. You have seen how loyalty is extracted, not rewarded. You have seen how entire populations are mobilized emotionally so that a small number of actors can reposition quietly. What remains is the line. Most people sense this line instinctively. They feel it as discomfort, fatigue, or resentment. Then they retreat. They tell themselves they are not that kind of person. They return to explanation, participation, noise. They re-enter the system at the exact point of maximum vulnerability. This chapter explains why that happens. Crossing the line requires accepting that no one is coming to restore balance, that there is no referee, that exposure is permanent. Once you see how leverage works, you cannot unsee it. And once you cannot unsee it, you are responsible for how you position yourself. That responsibility is what most men avoid. They prefer clarity handed down from authority. They prefer enemies labeled clearly. They prefer rules that apply equally. Those preferences are psychological shelters. They exist to protect identity, not survival. The line separates those who want to be right from those who want to remain intact. On one side are the explainers, the outraged, the permanently reactive. They will be used repeatedly because they are predictable. They will be invited into movements, purges, and moral campaigns that promise meaning and deliver exhaustion. On the other side are the observers who choose silence over signaling. They understand that the loudest moral claims often precede extraction. They wait, they watch. They do not volunteer their position until leverage is asymmetric in their favor. This is not about conspiracy. It is about incentives. Systems reward those who do not need validation. Power flows toward those who can delay response. Influence accumulates around those who do not confuse urgency with importance. Crossing the line does not make you superior. It makes you alone, for a while. That is the cost. Most people are unwilling to pay it. They trade sovereignty for belonging and call it virtue. This chapter does not ask you to agree. It asks you to notice which side you are already drifting toward. Because drift is the point. The system does not force you. It waits for you to volunteer. If you are still here, it means you have not fully volunteered yet. That hesitation is the last asset you own.